Done, sir.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
Good
So,
afternoon.
I'll welcome you all
Good afternoon, sir.
to the first class of DCM, Development Center Management. Looks like I am familiar with some of your core, is it? Did I?
Yes, sir.
If
Yes,
you
sir.
okay. That's nice, very nice. Yeah. Your names are familiar. That's why I was wondering, Hmm. It's great to come back to you then.
How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Very nice. Very nice. Are you expecting some more to join?
There are some more people to join. Let me check with the group.
Good, great. Okay, I think let's start as others keep joining us. So, what are your, did you go through the course syllabus? Did you receive?
Yes, little bit, sir. So we are yet to receive the study material.
Oh, study material has not yet come. Okay. So, how many of you are familiar with, let us say, assessment center or development center? You are familiar. Oh, wonderful.
I have already worked on that.
Wonderful.
Career progression part in one of the organization I was working with. They were actually implementing the career progression thing.
Oh, very good. Very good.
So I have already worked with that thing.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. And how about others? Others are not familiar? Are you?
Not that much, sir.
Not that much. Okay. So, what are your expectations? What are you expecting in this class?
Different ways of implementing the strategies.
Okay.
So we are still not
More
over the last time's, the kind of examination we had and the paper that I believe you have designed one of the papers, right? So,
I don't know. I really don't remember that.
or the last subject that we have, given the exam for. And
Uh,
obviously, when it is Dr. Bhaskar Rao's subject, the paper has to be very lengthy and it has to be in, details.
oh, I didn't know this.
So now this is something that I've figured it out.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
yes, we need probably we'll get a better break, segregation here from you.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Yeah, I really don't remember which paper and all that. You know, life
So,
life of a teacher goes around classes, examinations, and evaluations. So you really lose track of what you're doing, right?
you've been designing a lot of papers then lately, I believe, because the last subject, the book was written by you. What I've seen,
Which book was this?
I'm forgetting the name. I probably need to check.
Managing the training process.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that
yes.
was written by me. True.
That's why I was saying that probably you must have planned that exam, and it was really, really, it was a good exam, but it was really lengthy. So we've got this conclusion that probably it has to be a lengthy exam, or we need to study a bit more, and we need to have better understanding towards the subject.
When I did this diploma program, there was no textbook for that. We had to manage on our own. So subsequently, when ISTD asked me to help them out, I did that. Yeah.
Right. Similarly, sir, this subject has been start in the last batch only. What I've came to know.
Development center. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think this also, I've seen the book and all. I think most of these books are well written for the ISTD purpose, but perhaps it is time for us to review all this material after using it for a couple of years. So
Right.
maybe I will inform the concerned people to start the process. It is a good idea to review the books once in 2-3 years.
Correct.
And you can bring in the latest examples of that. Okay, that's very nice. So what else?
Nothing much. We're just waiting for the exams result. I think from ISTDN. Apart from that, work is going on. So that's usual stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think we are all having the best times for the training and development. Training and development is doing very well actually, and there are a lot of opportunities, and particularly in the development center and assessment centers, the opportunities are likely to go up further. Because everywhere it is competency based now, and therefore I think this course is pretty useful in terms of practice. And those of you who want to set up some business on your own in the L&D space, this will definitely come in handy.
Right, sir. So I actually wanted to, touch base on this and wanted to understand what is your perspective about the subject and what kind of avenues you look at it from, and what are the, future aspect of this particular subject, and how should we, perceive it? Is anything in specific?
So L&D per se is going to boom as a field of study and practice. You know, when the companies are interested in de-skilling and reskilling and skilling. So there is a lot of opportunity for the L&D professionals to chip in, and there are not enough of L&D practitioners in the country, unlike some developed countries where you see a lot of people who are doing the L&D practice. Here we look for more of jobs in companies and then probably live with that. We don't have too many practitioners who are competing in the market and imparting the skills, but I think the opening it has just started, and perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years this is going to boom. And companies are now looking for more sophisticated scientific ways of identifying the talent, and hence development centers will have a lot of opportunities in the future. I strongly believe in that. Had I been in my 30s, probably I would have thought of setting up something like this. But now, at my age and experience, I'm not considering that. Otherwise, there's a lot of opportunity.
Sir.
Yeah, I think for me, it is more of dissemination of what I know and trying to improve the people around me and the communities around me rather than trying to set up my own business. Otherwise, I would have thought this is a potential area for commencing my business. Okay, so I think that answers your question, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. I think first I will take you through the syllabus, although all of you would have seen that, but I think we'll just have a quick look at the syllabus and then I'll start the first session. All right, so you're able to see the syllabus, right? So there are 5 modules as usual, but here they have put 7 modules. 7th one, of course, is the revision class. There is no reason why a 6th module is in this, but basically the people who have written the 6th module apparently are trying to tell you that better to practice the content that you are learning is more of application oriented. Otherwise, in terms of learning, there are 5 modules. The first one is basically how this competency movement has started and whether it is really, the way it has evolved, has it really reached its full potential or not? I think that is where the perspectives are different. And then we go to talk more basically about technical competency framework, which is at a different level, and then the leadership competency framework. Then we look at development centers as a strategy for implementation. But we will just touch upon somewhere here and there what is the difference between assessment center and the development center, and application of development center in the integrated talent management center. That is what is the final module. So we are overall talking about managing talent. And as you know, managing talent now is completely different from what it used to be as a recruitment function in the past. And with the AI and ML coming and occupying a lot of space, several of the even HR jobs are going to be replaced. And in the context of the evolving technology scenario where AI, Gen AI is going to replace a lot of routine, mundane works, I think this development center concept will be essential for managing your talent needs. So that is what we're going to touch all these dimensions, and I'm sure all of you will be quite happy with whatever the content that you are going to receive, either to enrich your current job or to think of starting something on your own in the next couple of years. Okay, so we will start with the first topic. The first topic is basically about the, yeah, share this right. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop me at any point in time, no problem. We will be able to cover this course without any difficulty. I have planned it out well, all the 10 sessions. So nothing to worry. Your learning is more important than covering the course. Right, of course, my credentials are these. If you have any message, any clarifications to be sent, that is the email where I'm available. And textbook, of course, you will receive. It's an ISTD material. This is what is covered in the first module. What is competency, type of competency moment, how it started, and where we are, and various models of competency development and relevance of competency for a learning and development professional. So that is where we will end. So this is a lot of subheadings and all. When you receive the PPT, you will be able to see it. So I'll skip this. Okay, I think I will just go to the Indian knowledge systems a bit here. Competency movement, although a lot of credit is given to the Western world, India has practiced it much before the West started realizing what competency model is. So in the Arthashastra by Kautilya, you can see the words which are used in the bold letters. So how does a king recruit his ministers? No, it is not like the current scenario that we are witnessing, how people become ministers. The king used to recruit ministers based on certain criteria, and those were all the competencies. So he'll thoroughly investigate all the qualities of anyone considered for the appointment as a minister. So ministers don't become because the number of votes. Of these qualities, nationality, family background, amenability to discipline shall be verified from reliable people. So it is just not, your impressions or the perception of the king. I think that it should be verifiable information, and the candidate's knowledge of various arts shall be tested by the experts in their respective fields. Intelligence, perseverance, and dexterity shall be evaluated by examining his past performance, while eloquence, boldness, and presence of mind shall be ascertained by interviewing him personally. So the king would conduct an interview before he finalizes on who should be inducted as a minister. Watching how he deals with others will show his strength, energy, endurance, ability to suffer adversities, integrity, loyalty, and friendliness. So there will be some kind of referral system, or the kind of feedback that we collect now was done by the then kings for the ministers. From his intimate friends, the king shall find out about his strength, health, and character, whether lazy or energetic, fickle or steady. The candidate's amiability and love of mankind, absence of a tendency to hate, shall be ascertained by personal observation. Now, all these qualities, basically what we talked about today is competencies, were used by the Indian kings then to recruit ministers. Now, if that is happening at the level of ministers, obviously it would have happened at various other levels in the functioning of society itself. Now, but then we are Indians, we don't document so many things, we don't conceptualize, we do practice, and we do keep everything open. Therefore, we do not have any great literature of any scientist, right, defining competencies and all. But over a period of time, I think the Western world realized that it's not the qualifications, not the experience that matters. There's something beyond, and what they conceptualized as the competency. Now, competencies are used by some organizations, but not all the organizations for various reasons, which we'll discuss as we go forward. So people have and acquire competencies. Now we all have some competencies. We are all competent. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing what we have been doing for so far for our livelihood or even for passion. Now we apply these in the form of behavior. I think one of the important dimensions of competencies is behavior. In fact, if you look at most of the jobs that were offered in the past, they were all based on your educational qualifications and some part of it is experience, but competencies were not assessed. The, the danger of not assessing the competition is if you get people with bad behaviors, the company can be run down. And you know some of the examples where people at the helm of affairs had bad behaviors, which are their competencies do not include what we call the right actions and right thoughts and right feelings, and that has run the company into troubles. Now, our behavior produces the outputs. In fact, you may be super knowledgeable, you may be highly intelligent, you may be considered to be very smart, but still, if your behavior is not good enough, that is not going to help you in converting your whatever you have in mind into your products. So, along with your cognitive skills, it is very important to have the behavioral skills as a part of competencies. And all this, if it is done well, will make you a successful professional or a successful individual. Ultimately, competence is what actually drives somebody's performance to be superior than others. Now, in a particular position in an organization, suppose there are 10 people, and when you do the performance appraisal, some of them are rated above the others. Some people are considered to be more successful in their job than others. It may not be because of their technical knowledge. It may be because of their behavioral, competencies. So just reflect on your own experiences, or when you have done some appraisal for your own office staff, and see what actually differentiates between the successful people versus the non-successful. The people who are more competent in some technical skills, but with bad behaviors or bad competencies, may have been rated lower than those with good behavioral or competencies. So that is what it basically amounts to. A competency, again, like many other constructs in the realm of human resource management, it has several definitions because a lot of people have worked on this concept, and therefore the definitions are many. So we will touch base. I have given you as many as possible, though, so that you have this ready reckoner with you. But you don't have to read and memorize all of them. You can use whatever you want to use in your context, because I recognize the fact that each one of you come from a different background of experience, and therefore what is relevant to one may not be relevant to the other. So we will see some of them, and then maybe we'll have some small discussion on what it means to you in your organization. So competencies are basically underlying characteristics of people that indicate ways of behaving or thinking, generalizing across situations, and enduring for a reasonably long period of time. Now, competencies can be acquired, but they will have to be endured for a reasonably long period of time. I mean, that is a good contribution by Spencer and Spencer. It was published in their paper in 1993. And we'll take a couple of others. Seema Sanghi, the author of the textbook, she has summarized the competency as an underlying behavioral characteristic that can result in effective individual performance, focusing on personal characteristics, not directly tied to work and achievement. So it is personal characteristics which are very, very important, and these will not change. Although competencies can be acquired, but acquisition of competence is a little long drawn process. So they have to be your personal characteristics, you have to internalize them. Then you have what these competencies as underlying characteristic of an individual, which are casually change in one variable causes change in another related to the job performance. Now, ultimately, we are looking at competencies from the perspective of our jobs or the corporate performance, but then competencies are there in every role. Whatever the role that each one of us play in our life, I think each one has its own competencies, even at a personal level. So here are a few more definitions. So I will just skip them in the interest of our time, but all of them will reach you as a part of our PPT. And if you have any questions at any point in time, you can definitely raise that. Uh, Selby et al. Competencies are abilities expressed in terms of behavior. So everywhere we are talking about behavior, which generally we do not have so much of assessment in our job recruitment process. When you do it, most of the selection process include a lot of numerical ability and technical ability and less of behavioral abilities, but that is what is important when you come to the competency based selection processes. So you have some more. The Gartner group will look at that. The competency is a set of characteristics, including skills, knowledge, and attributes that causes or forecast performance. I think this also tells you the last two words tells you when you recruit somebody for a position in an organization for a particular job, is it possible to have some prediction about what is his success factor and to what level he or she can rise in the organization. I think all HR L&D people should be concerned about two things. One, when we are recruiting somebody, are we going to have someone who is going to be successful in that particular job? Otherwise, our entire effort will be futile. Number two, you don't recruit somebody just for that particular job. You recruit people for continuing in the organization, rising to a level of performance where their full potential can be used for the benefit of the individual as well as the organization. So is it possible to predict the behavior of these people and understand to what level they can rise in the organization is a question that the competency-based recruitment can also address. And there are a few other, definitions. So my suggestion is please read them, understand from your context. Now I'll just pause here. If you have any questions, we can discuss them. How many of your companies have actually looked at competencies compared to the traditional? Yes, Mr. Bose.
Yes, sir. So we have actually concluded this year's appraisals. So the time when we were actually conducting all those, we were actually focusing more on KBI and KPI. So KBI, whatever you are discussing about right now, key behavioral indicators. So this is something related to that. And the discussion that we have made that their behavior, impact of the behavior that they are possessing within the organization, it consists of the peer feedback, senior reporting manager feedback, skip level reporting manager feedback. So everything consists of that, and based on that, the KBI matrix plays a very vital role. So the rating comes about 1 to 5. 5 is the best one, 1 is the lowest one. So in terms
Okay.
of KPI parameters, we actually judge that on 5 to 1. So 5 means the termination, and 1 means the best one. So this is how we actually calculate the things in our organization. So this is
Okay.
something which is very much important in terms of selecting the candidate for a particular role. Even though in terms of career progression, also suppose we are evaluating somebody from assistant manager to manager or manager to senior manager, or maybe a senior executive to assistant manager level. So that time we actually focus more on the KPIs rather than the KPIs, because somewhere, when you get into a people manager level, you'll have to have those kind of competencies which will relate to your this empathetical behaviors, how you are managing the employees under you, how you are actually delegating the works, how you are actually processing through all the things that you have been assigned for. So these things comes into the play in terms of KBI part. So nowadays, organizations are more focuses, much more focused on the KPI part rather than the KPI, because they know that a KPI it can be managed, but the behavioral factor it comes within. So this is something which that person should possess within him, because skills can be enhanced, but the behavior it's merely gets changed, because somebody is too much reluctant in their approach. That can be changed hardly. It requires a lots of push from the management. This is what I, I actually experienced.
Okay, great. That's very nice to hear from you. Yeah, Mr. Sandeep Ray.
Yeah, so I'm from this agri-input sector. So in our organization is also we have this definite set of competencies for different roles. Like we have some customer-facing team members. So they have some technical competencies wherein we have product knowledge, the crop knowledge, then data-driven decision making, how he or she is able to do. Then we also have customer centricity as one of the key competency. And apart from that, there are some attributes also, like the negotiation skills, and then the communication part, emotional intelligence. So different kind of competencies are there, which are different and they're role specific. Suppose we also have team members who are into market development. So for them, these technical competencies are very important. How they are adapted the crop knowledge, and how they are able to means modify the communication to different stakeholders. So we follow this competency process, and I could relate to the Gartner group definition. So we go by the skill, the knowledge, and the attributes as a
Very,
competency. Yeah.
very nice. Yeah, how about others? Are your organizations following some of these competency-based approaches?
Not exactly, sir.
And
So,
I would like to add one more thing. So in our organization, even while we go for the interview process, selection process for the different roles, so we have a competency-based interview as well, wherein we are mm, uh, means dividing the candidates on the basis of how they are doing in the different competencies.
So,
Okay.
Testing
so
of the emotional intelligence.
You are referring to behavior-based interviews.
Yes, competency-based. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
previously I have worked with MetLife. It is a captive center, and where we used to have this negotiation skill, customer centric, EWS, and all these kind of trainings, which were actually really, mapped according to the need of the hour. If you are in customer facing team, how you need to go about it, what kind of customers and what kind of clients you need to retain. Retention also was one of the training we used to take care of. So this was there with MetLife, and because they had a very US management, all the management people was from US. So the training outreach was very different. In when you talk about an Indian training firm or a training firm which directly comes from the US, so their approach was different in terms of delivery and in terms of training as well. So they're very specific. The timelines were very specific. They need to do this training in a day, so they have to do it in a day. And then people used to come in for I had attended a training for negotiation skills. The guy came in, the trainer actually came in for a day, for 5 hours, and they were very specific what they want to deliver on and what they actually wanted. So when you talk about the approach, the US people were far more organized, if I have to say, as compared to Indian training firms which were there.
Correct. Yeah, sure. I think they're in terms of maturity model, they are far ahead of us. Yeah, true.
Correct, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, Mr. Anand Kumar.
yes, so I work in education sector and I work with the state governments. So currently I am with Himachal Pradesh. So overall, the country's India's education sector is going through a transformation where so much changes are coming in after national education policy in 2020. So these recommendations are like competency based assessment of teachers and the principals of schools and the functionaries thereafter, the support system and the people who are coming from state public service commissions. So the entire structure is becoming competency based, and the student learning outcomes are also competency based. So the entire syllabus, the curriculum are being changed. So so far recruitment is not being done at that in that pattern, but the entire processes and mechanisms are being transfer like changing into those modes. So it's really very challenging to assess, to map their competences, because the backgrounds of teachers and headmasters and their qualifications levels are very diverse. So if we take the teachers, their assessment, the kind of methodologies, their knowledge about the subject knowledge, expertise, uh, kind of pedagogical skills, all these needs to be mapped, and it is at a scale. So at scale, where there are lakhs of teachers and 75,000 head principals, and the support system is like in that very numbers. So this is very complex and challenging. So this
Whatever
is
is
going
complex
to a
and challenging
transformation.
is an opportunity for us. Now, whenever
Yes.
a problem for somebody else is an opportunity for us. That is what I was telling you in the beginning. I think as a society moves more towards competency-based approaches, I think all of us will have more opportunities for practicing the profession.
So for Himachal Pradesh, I have made one competency framework for teacher where there are 9 domains,
Very good.
and I'm working towards those assessment areas and the entire infrastructure for that.
Excellent. Very good. Very happy that you are giving your experience, sharing your experience to all the benefit of all the other participants. Yeah. Excellent.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else wants to contribute? Yeah. Please share your experiences. I think that's more interesting than a monologue.
In terms of competency built up and everything, so there is a live example like that I can give you. That is OCLD, Overall Center of Learning and Development. The hospitality industry, as because I belong from the hospitality industry, or OCLD and OSAR is two of the one of the biggest projects of Oberoi Group. So they actually hire college students. It's technically less skilled, but they actually develop their skills within their development center. So once a candidate gets enrolled with the OSAR, they will say like, "Oh my God, I got a government job," kind of thing. That kind of feeling we used to have earlier these days. So during our college days, we used to have, oh my God, I have cracked OSAR. Oh my God, I have cracked OCLD. So before that kind of thing, they actually assess that particular candidate. Can be a psychometric test. It can be an emotional intelligence test. Okay, technical skill test will also be there. Clear that. Different kind of set of interviews were there. A particular candidate will have to go through everything, and particular assessment will be based on their skills, and depending on that skills they will be selected. So this is something which actually in the place right now also. USAR and UCLD and Taj is also having this kind of programs. Taj is having their own management development program. So they hire college students from IHMs. They build up their own skills within their development centers. So this is something which is very much good. And earlier in retail background, retail part also, if I talk about ABR, Aditya Birla Little Limited, they do have a management training program. So this is something which related to the development center.
Excellent. Excellent. I think a lot of corporates are practicing it already. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay. All right. So now let's understand the basics, the definitions part. So what is competence and what are competencies? So competence belongs to the role. What are the roles that we are playing? Without this attribute, one cannot perform the role. Whereas competency belongs to the person. And without this attribute, one cannot be successful in the right. Now, these two, I think you'll have to basically understand competence belongs to the role that you're performing, and competency is an individual trait that belongs to you as an individual. Now, both are important. Unless you have a certain competence, you will not be successful in a particular role. And unless you have a competency that is unique to you, you will not be able to perform that particular role. So when you are designing the competency models in the organizations, you need to understand both the competencies required, uh, competence required for the job or the particular role, and what are the competencies required of an individual. Competencies are the characteristics of a manager that lead to the demonstration of skills and abilities, which result in effective performance within an occupational area. Now, as a manager, if you're working in, let us say, hospitality industry, your competencies are different from a manager who are working in an IT industry, right? Now, the role may be the same, the manager may be the designation may be the same, but the competencies to be successful in that particular role are different in both these organizations. I think that is what you need to understand here. Competency also embodies the capacity to transfer skill and abilities from one area to the other. Now, it's very interesting if you look at the civil servants, particularly the IAS and IPS officers, they keep changing their roles every 3-4 years. You are suddenly asked to head the coal corporation. 5 years or 3 years later, you will go and head another dairy corporation, and then you may go to some other corporation to manage some finance or a banking of, operation. Now, competencies actually also it involves your capacity to transfer skills and abilities from one area to the other. So this is a very important factor that all of us should understand, particularly those who are training the leaders in the organizations or those who are performing in the leadership roles. I think a good number of you must be performing the leadership roles, and therefore it's important that you understand this. Yes, Mr. Bose, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So this is something which you have already described. This is something related to the job swiping. Nowadays corporates are adapting to this. Somebody is from the operations department and wants to pursue some kind of role in L&D or HR or maybe in accounts. So in order to change the taste, in order to maximize the retention, what we actually do is we actually tell that person to get into a different department for a day. Say for example, suppose the accounts guy wants to know the operations part. So we'll say that like, okay, you report to the operations manager for today and learn things that what they are actually doing. So this is something which we actually implement when we are working with the leadership development program, where we want somebody to get into a senior position, and that person will be having the knowledge about everything which comes under his own criteria. Suppose the operation part is very much close to the accounts. So how the accounts teams receivable, whether it's a payable team, how they are actually working in terms of in coordination with the operations team and the sales team. So that thing needs to be learned in a vast way. So in order to do that, we when we implement any kind of leadership development program, we actually include those things so that people can get the knowledge about all the other factors apart from his own core background team. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So
Next.
to add on to this, just a little gist. I was working with Blinkit Grofer. So what we used to do was we introduced to SME kind of function there, only to those people who were performing well on the floor, who had that certain education qualification and have that kind of understanding towards what they need to do. Now they have the add-on, work as well, where they need to go back to the customer and understand the customer issues and escalation and all those things. So they are the right people as they already have the awareness about the subject and they already have the experience. Now what they need to do is they need to implement that on floor. They need to show us what kind of numbers they can bring in. And we had FCRs, and when you talk about FCRs, these are first call resolution in call center. So what is the percentage of FCRs that we are getting now? Is that whether it has improved? If the improvement is there, so that the competency mapping is done, is correct.
Okay. 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 You are assessing that.
Yes, sir. So we did that with a team of 10 people who were actually shortlisted, and we gave them a period of 3 months. Every 3 months, we used to change that. So we assessed their performance in these 3 months, what kind of performance we are getting, and then out of these 10, we're gonna finalize 3 people who can be a permanent SME kind of role, who can be on papers, can be a permanent SME, and then further train the team on customer satisfaction, or what kind of escalation matrix we should follow, and what kind of escalation matrix should be given to the operations. Because you cannot directly escalate the call to a manager or a senior manager. You have the authority to do so, but you cannot do that. Still, you cannot do that. But it has to follow a certain stages which are there. So
Right.
this was actually done with a certain understanding and what kind of education, qualification, and experience they have on board, and how they are going with subject.
Very nice. Okay, great. Yeah, okay. Wonderful, wonderful. I think all of you have had some experience with the other, though some of you are sharing, maybe others perhaps will share as we go along. Right. Okay, now let's understand the finer aspects of competence and competency. Competence is based on skills. Competency is behavior based. And that's becoming more and more important. And attributes of the job are a part of the competence. Attributes of the personality part of the competency, because that is related to the individual. Now, competence is process centric. I think that's what you have just now shared. And competency is result centric. So at the end of the day, in your organizations, you would see that individuals are responsible for certain results, and therefore that's a part of the competency. And competence has certain standards prescribed for that, and individuals are required to attain those standards. Whereas competency is a manner of behavior, and that is important for us to attain those standards of performance. And competence, what is measured, and competency is how the standard is achieved. Now, how I am able to achieve the results, which is largely driven by, in fact, at the philosophical level, what we do and what we achieve is also dependent on what our value system is. Value system is a part of our competency. And value systems are very, very important. Nowadays, I think globally, everybody is looking at what value systems you carry to the organization, and whether there's a value systems of the organization and your value system. Is there a matching between these two? If it is not, it is unlikely that you will perform well in that organization, because you do not fit into the organization through your behavioral requirements. I think when Mr. Anand Kumar said that he's doing some designing of the competency-based approaches for the school teachers or school headmasters and all that, I think he has to also probably keep these things into mind. These examples and whatever the conceptual things that we're discussing probably will be coming in handy for you to be able to refine your own assessments that you're designing. That's pretty useful.
Yes,
Now,
sir. Thank
what
you.
are the characteristics of competencies? Competencies are basically at the individual level. Competencies lead to demonstration of skills and abilities. Please see the word, underline the word demonstration. So that means your behavior should be visible, observable. Otherwise, other things which are not visible or observable cannot be measured. And hence, competencies must be observable. This aspect of competency is especially important from the assessment and development center perspective. When we talk about, when we go to the next session, we will see the technical competency framework. You will then understand how important it is that a competency is observable. And a competency is not observed by just one person. It is to be observed by multiple people, and multiple data will give the rating to them, and then there will be exchange of notes. So a competency which is not demonstrable or observable is not, that is, we are not looking at that. Competencies must finally lead to an effective performance of the individual. What we are looking at the organization is performers and who will keep the organization ahead of the competition. And therefore, with whatever the competencies that you are looking at, they must lead to a better performance so that your organization can achieve that competitive advantage vis-a-vis your competitors. And that is why the competency mapping is so very important. Competency also embodies the capacity of transfer skills and abilities, which we have already discussed. Competencies cannot be restricted to one specific job role or situation. So they are more all-encompassing, more generalizable at the individual level. Competencies offer a description of what excellence means in a particular role. Whether you are in a L&D department or HR department or maybe a services head or whatever. In fact, the very important question all of us should understand is, what do we mean by excellence in a certain role? Do we have a clarity of shared understanding of what excellence means at an organization level, at a task level, at a department level, and at an individual level? I think many organizations do not really reflect on this. The word excellence is used in a very, very vague term. But otherwise, if you talk to a couple of managers in the organization and ask them, okay, you keep apprising so many people in your, job role, but can you tell me what excellence is in the for you among the people who are being assessed by you, and just see what kind of a response you get. You may not be very satisfied. You may be, in fact, in for surprises, but many people keep assessing, not understanding the real meaning of excellence for their own employees. Now, characteristics of competencies basically involves 5 dimensions. One is motives, traits, self-concept, knowledge, and skill. I think knowledge and skill, most of us understand. Skill is the ability to perform a certain physical or a mental task, right? No, you give me a math sum, I am able to do it. That's my skill. Mental skill is known to you. You give me, you ask me to drive a vehicle, you ask me to swim in a pool or a tank, then you can assess my skill in swimming. So those are much easier to understand. Knowledge is, of course, can be tested. There are several ways by which you can test, particularly using the cognitive part of the human being. You can understand and assess the knowledge. Self-concept is very difficult. It is your attitudes, values, and self-image. And that all of us cannot easily assess, and that's a challenge. And that competency, the development center framework will help us in understanding what an individual thinks of his own self-concept. And then traits, physical characteristics, and consistent responses to situations and information. This is again not well defined in most of our roles in the organizations. The physical characteristics are defined in certain roles, but not for all the roles. And if it is clear to us, probably assessment becomes that much easier. Now come to the motives. The things a person consistently thinks about or wants that cause action. Motives drive, direct, and select behavior towards certain actions or goals and away from others. Now, how do you actually understand the motive of an individual? How do you understand an employee's drive that directs him and selects a certain course of action? It's a challenge. I think the development center has a role to play in deciphering an individual's motives, traits, and self-concept. While most of us probably are used to assessing the skill and knowledge in some way or the other 3 is not, we are not, used to doing that. I think this is what it is. The surface mostly they're most easily developed are the knowledge and the skills. At the L&D centers also, we do the easiest part is to impart knowledge or the skill, and the most difficult is to actually develop the personality of the individual. I think that's a very challenging thing. And somewhere in between, you have the attitudes and values. And the more and more we are able to develop the core personality of an individual, and that is aligned to the value system of the organization, and we enable the individual to acquire the knowledge and skills required for that role, I think the individual will perform better. And the whole the development center focuses on developing the individual on all these aspects. There are two kinds of competencies. Okay, any questions so far? We can go a bit slow, no issues. But if you have any questions, I think I would like to. Basically, your fundas should be clear. Once your fundas are clear, rest of it is much simpler. Yeah, any questions? All right. So let's understand the difference between the functional competencies versus the threshold competencies. All of us have this. We all have some threshold competencies. We also have some functional competencies. The threshold competencies are essential characteristics. Everyone in the job needs to be minimally effective. So if you don't have this, maybe what are the communication skills, the stress management skills, or whatever that we all need to have, without which you just can't exist there. Those are all the threshold skills. But this does not distinguish superior from average performance. Now, these are essential, basic. These are necessary but not sufficient. Those are necessary but not sufficient. What is sufficient? Along with the threshold competencies, you also need to have your functional competencies. That makes you a better employee, a better performer, or that makes you a better person in the organization versus a person who is just about average. So a combination of these two are required at the organization, at the employee level. Now you also have something called organizational competencies. Now this is very important. Why some companies perform better than the others? What is the difference? Why some companies perform better than others? Now let us look at two companies. Both are very, very popular and all of you are definitely familiar. HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank. Okay. How do you look at these two banks? And what differentiates these two banks?
So they're really competitive, and the service that they provide that differentiates them.
Okay, how do you say that? I mean, can you?
So if you have a understanding what kind of people you're looking for at the hiring stage, and what kind of competencies, as you have said, we are looking for, and what kind of functions they would be performing, and what are their motives behind that, and what kind of educational skill we are mapping with it. And then obviously, when you, as rightly said, behavior is very important aspect. So if the behavior is in place, everything falls in the right right category.
So what is the difference that you see in the service of HDFC versus ICICI?
So major difference is in their approach, which starts right from their leadership, like the strategy, to the customer orientation in the services. ICIC is more aggressive at the way we perceive their business. The aggressive nature in their strategic, their sales, and the customer services. While SDFC is different in that way, they are not so aggressive. They are making their customer orientation is one of the bigger you say attribute which attracts customer to this SDFC. But ICIC is doing it differently by aggressive sales, aggressive marketing, and all that. This is the way I perceive their businesses.
To add on, I have done a project with Axis Bank in Hyderabad.
Okay.
So when I was with Axis, what I came to know that there are three major banks when you talk about private sector. SDFC being number one, second is ICICI, and third being Axis. And when we differentiate Axis with ICICI, there's a huge gap in terms of the competency mapping and the kind of people they are working there, and kind of customer service they are giving. And there were a lot of issues which were regularly popping up in the back office or in the customer center of Axis Bank. The only reason which was there was the kind of services they were providing, credit card services, or they were too aggressive, they're too pushy towards the customer. They didn't have any customer centric approach towards the customer. And similarly, ICICI has recently, at that point of time, it's 2 years back, introduced a policy where they were only hiring people from IIM for a certain target set that they have set. So when you talk about the differences is what kind of team they are looking forward to, what kind of results they want them from. And when you talk about Axis Bank, similarly, they were not looking into that section. They were like, anyone can come in. We are not going to, assess them as much as ICICI or HDFC is grilling them. And then when you have that kind of people coming in, the training is much tougher because you need to train them a lot of things. They don't have that kind of understanding. They don't bring that kind of value to the table. So there's a lot of work they need to do, and then the measurement and the evaluation which they have is very poor. In when I talk about access, and similarly when you talk about HDFC, they make sure that people who are in the system, they are the right kind of candidate who can actually work on these things. So probably they don't need to train them on everything. So these were some major differences.
Okay, I mean, what I understand from both of your conversations is basically perhaps HDFC and ICICI, the leadership level, the execution level, they have a lot more clarity in terms of what kind of people or what kind of competencies are required. But HDFC follows the competency modeling to a large extent, and therefore they are able to assemble the right kind of people. Whereas Axis perhaps is somewhere behind them, and hence it has its own issues compared to even today. In terms of performance, HDFC and ICICI are ahead of Axis, and Axis keeps on coming up and down. That is what you see. So the organizational competencies are very, very important, and different though both HDFC and ICICI are successful, their approaches are very different, and what success means to each one of them is also different. Although we're just looking at the balance sheet, profit and loss account and all that, but for the internal leadership team, what success, how they measure success at the individual level is definitely different, and they have been able to develop their model. Now, coming to the behavioral competencies, it is basically understanding the attitudes and demonstrable actions that create success in their role. And I think what you have already stated, that behavioral competency model is used by some of your organizations where during the selection process. Yes, ma'am, Smita ma'am.
Sir, I'm really sorry to interrupt the session, but I just had this one small doubt. Basically, the types of competencies, whatever I've been taught today, like, is it because I do not come from the corporate background? I definitely have this doubt. It is not mandatory that all the competencies are being mapped in every organization. Does it varies from organization to organization? If I am correct in understanding it.
By the way, no, before I answer, what is your background? Where are you working?
Sir, I work with Academic Heights Public School as a teacher and an academic in charge for high school in Hyderabad.
Okay. I see. Very good. Very nice. So what brings you to the ISTD program?
Having a BCom HR and even a MBA HR, due to some pressure, I just came into training and development was a passion. So not corporates, but I can at least get into training of students. I'm doing this now.
Okay. You teach high school?
Yes, sir.
And you also teach have any L&D program for your school teachers?
No, I am next supposed to do it after this. I'm planning to.
Very good. Very good. Very nice to know about that. Okay. Now coming to your question, it is not that every organization has the competencies mapped for every job. We have not reached to that level of sophistication. That said, there are some organizations which have already brought in competency mapping to fairly critical roles. Like I said, HDFC follows the competency modeling to a good amount of their employee, selection and progression both. Development Center basically focuses on the progression rather than the selection, whereas Assessment Center talks more about the selection process. How to get into an organization is taken care by the Assessment Center, But once you get into the organization, how your development takes place in the organization is the focus of the development center.
Because when I just took a overlook of all these competencies, I could relate these four competencies more towards the education sector than the previous ones. And being an entrepreneur for 4 years for Bachpan, I think these four will actually more fit into the education sector. That's why I just had this doubt. And
No, it fits into everything. In fact, education sector is a laggard. Although we teach the competency mapping as an academic discipline or academic subject, but in most of the universities or the schools and the higher education system also doesn't follow this. I'm happy to know that Mr. Anand Kumar is doing something for the schools in the Himachal Pradesh. That's what he said. So it's a good start. Actually, if you look at the education sector, most of the teachers do not uh, have this competency
we
mapping.
do have a huge gap, because it goes on with old grandma's rule always, with the pedagogies and the teachers training. There is nothing that has been mapped with the teachers and done any uh, tailored program for the teaching, for the trainings.
So again, here you have got a huge opportunity to whatever implement whatever you are doing and create a good path for yourself.
I
So-
deem it to be an opportunity now.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, but then there's an opportunity.
Yes. Threats are
So
always an
this,
opportunities.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
so this has become a policy mandate. Very soon you will see the entire country, like all the states will be doing this. It has begun in Chhattisgarh, it has begun in Himachal Pradesh, Bihar and UP is not working yet. The credit system is going to get translated in the education system. So all these are the churning is going on at national level. And for each and every component of education system, there is a framework already in place by the national committees. So it is going to happen, sir, very soon.
So I think Smita ma'am, it should be sounding like music for your ears, right?
Yeah, definitely I'm able to relate it to.
Okay, great. Okay, now let's come to the functional competencies. These are needed for an employee to perform on a certain job. These are related to a job. For example, if you're an L&D manager, you have to have certain competencies related to that particular function. If you are a production manager, you will have a certain competencies related to production function. So likewise, each function has its own competency requirements, and it is the job of the competency specialist in the organization to decipher what competencies are required. And how do you do that? We will come to that, come to know little later. And of course, the most important is the leadership competencies. Today, if there is a huge depth of talent, I think it is in this leadership area, right from political leadership to the business leadership. Everywhere there's a huge gap in terms of the competent leaders. Whatever we have seen in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, that is not followed anywhere, and the current leaderships are nowhere comparable to what we have seen some of the great leaders in the past. Now, specific leadership behaviors required to lead superior performance. In fact, today many of the leaders do not even know what performances are they required to deliver. The biggest challenge is performance is ill-defined. For a political leader, winning the seats is the performance. If that is what is defined as performance, then obviously development of society is not on the cards, right? And similarly, for the educational leader, if the performance is defined as how many students pass the examination is what is your key performance indicator, then you will only promote that, not what is required. If you say, I want to develop responsible citizens for the society, I want to develop responsible leaders for the society, your approach will be different from the KPI being, you have to achieve 90% pass percentage. You have to get so much of a salary for your students who are passing out. You have to get so many jobs for your students. So the indicators themselves are different, ill-defined, then obviously your performance will be also not in line with what we are really looking for from the core competence perspective, right? Now, let us understand what are the core competencies and the workplace competencies. At the core competencies, the scope of competency for core competence under scope core competencies, the entire organization. In fact, the entire organization, the core competence should be focused on the mission of the organization. Unfortunately, many of our companies these days do not even understand. Some of the mid-level leaders too, some senior leaders also do not understand what the mission of the organization. They just perform. It becomes such a activity-based job for them. Therefore, they don't understand what the mission is. And for at the workplace, as an individual, yeah, it is still quite important because each individual is looking for his or her own professional growth. I think there is a certain amount of focus. Purpose at the organization level is strategic. No, your competency-based approach is strategic approach for you to be a better performing organization. And at the individual level, it is tactical. You must be able to prove yourself and move on with your career progression. At the participants, who are the participants of this? At the organization level, the business units are the participants. At the individual level, workplace competencies is the worker. And the task, the process of the organizations are very important at the organizational level. And at the individual, these are the activities carried out by the individual. And competencies at the organization level are basically core competencies are global to the organization. That means they're all encompassing the organization. At the workplace, they're all position specific. As the position of an individual changes, your competency requirement changes. In fact, one of the important principles that we have to look at today, the position progression is that your performance is related to a particular position that you are in. But when you are promoted to a higher level position, your competencies are different. A lot of organizations have made this mistake of promoting people based on their current performance. And when they go to the next level, they won't be able to, they have failed in their performance because organizations have failed to recognize the competencies for that level are not the same as the competencies at the current level. And if the individual is unable to acquire those new competencies, obviously he or she will not be able to perform. So the workplace competencies are related to a particular position, and if the position changes, your competencies have to change, or the organization has to enable you to help to acquire those additional competencies. Now, how do they benefit the competencies? How do they benefit each one? At the role holder, that is, you are a manager, you are a general manager, you are a vice president, or you are the CEO, provides insights on what can create superior performance or success on the job. So, what makes you an outstanding CEO? The competencies required are different from what made you an outstanding manager. Unless you are able to navigate the path from manager to the CEO with the acquisition of required competencies that will make you a superior performer vis-a-vis the others, you will not be able to be successful in that particular role. Now, coming to the manager, provide a common language, objective definition to help select and develop employees and provide language to guide performance feedback. Now, this is, as a manager, you are going to lead some team of people. That is why you are a manager. At that level, you must be able to develop similar vocabulary and use a similar definition for all of your employees who are reporting to you in terms of what their performance is. If you want everyone to be excellent, then you must be able to communicate to your team what do you mean by excellence. Excellence is not a word understood by everyone in the same way. It means different things for different people. So by giving examples, by giving some anecdotes, by giving some experience from your own positions of performance, I think you should be able to communicate to your team what excellence means to you. Then the people who are working with you can relate to you in the same breath and then start performing in that particular way. At the organizational level, which is basically a top management function, provide an action-oriented common language to identify the key behaviors that create success. Now, why GE is GE? Why Microsoft is Microsoft? Why Apple is Apple? How do we what inferences can we draw from them? Obviously, when we talked about HDFC and ICICI Bank, there are n number of other banks. We are not talking about them. Why are we talking about these two banks, which are performing far superior to the others? So this is because these organizations, such organizations, they provide you an action-oriented common language, basically understood by everyone down to the lowest level, so that they exhibit the key behaviors and create success. If ICICI, if you are concluding that ICICI is an aggressive bank, I think the bank has been able to communicate to the employees that we have to be aggressive. Aggressive in terms of what the parameters that go into that aggression also are known and communicated adequately to their employees. Whereas in the case of HDFC, the aggressiveness is not what they demonstrate or they want. This is something different, which they value, and they allow their employees to demonstrate those qualities, and they are still good performers. So performance of the organization is dependent on what kind of behaviors you want the employees to exhibit is what is important at the organizational level. Now, how did the competency movement start? I think if you look at the whole scientific management came into being in 1911 with Frederick Tyler. Frederick Tyler is the one who first started measuring the work and saying that differentiating one's performance to the other based on some scientific principles. Now, he made some work and study and said some people perform better in the same period of 8 hours of duty, and therefore they have to be compensated better and all that. But then he did not look at something related to the competencies, which came much later. And this is what McClelland has conceptualized in the year 1973. So he has published a paper with the title of which is Testing for Competence rather than Testing for Intelligence. So till that time, a lot of emphasis was there on the IQ based testing. So a lot of written tests which were conducted prior to that were based on your intelligent quotient, whether it is related to some data or some interpretation or subject knowledge and all. But then the first paper which was published by McClelland said there is something more to a job performance than merely intelligence. And all of us today can understand easily that people perform in their roles not because of their own intelligence, it is something more than that. And that is the beginning of the competency movement. So I think I'll pause here. I think we have discussed something which has happened over a period of time. Different perspectives have come. I will leave this for a couple of a few seconds or a minute or so. Look at these words and see how far the Indian system of managing the human resources was compared to what has happened in the last 60, 70 years in the West. The Western countries are only talking about in the last 60 years or so. We were far ahead of all these people in terms of managing the competencies much, much before. But unfortunately, for whatever the reasons, we have fallen behind, and therefore we have to now talk about competency mapping, competency centers, the development centers and assessment centers. So if only India had continued the tradition of being competency based and merit based, perhaps we would have been far ahead of many other nations. Now, 73, the first beginning was made by McClelland with the publication of the paper. And then he also came up with the development of behavior event interview, which some of you have said. So behaviors are more important, are as important as the intelligence of an individual. In 1982, the context for identifying the special characteristics and assessing and developing managerial talent was developed by the Voyages. And then 1986, Job Competency Survey was developed. And 1993, Development of Competency Dictionary was published by the Spencer and Spencer. And they also, during that period, 1993, Job Competence Assessment method was also brought in or published for the public use. So it has taken about 20 years for the competency development to take some shape. And since 1993 onwards, a lot of companies have been using the competency-based approaches, but still they have not grown to a stage where they will replace the old job analysis-based methods of recruitment or developing people in the organization. We will see what are the criticisms against this and how these things will probably take shape in the years to come. Right? Now, what are the advantages if you have competency mod approaches? First, competency and behavior indicators are needed to produce results, provide direction to the organization. If you are saying that HDFC has evolved themselves with a certain set of competencies which has put them at a leading position, obviously the direction has come from the top management, the leadership team, with a clear definition of what kind of competencies they are looking for, and then what behaviors are expected from the employees. Obviously, if you have worked for a few years in ICICI Bank and go and join HDFC Bank, your behaviors of ICICI Bank may not be acceptable to HDFC Bank. You may suddenly feel, unless you modify your behaviors, you will be feeling fish out of pond, and you may eventually leave that organization. That is possible in terms of many other companies where they have certain, defined behavioral expectations or the competencies expected of the employees. Right? Now, they have to be measured. When the measurement of competence is coupled with the measurement of impact of these competence on business results, this heightens the organization's capability to program. Now, ICICI Bank, in fact, if you look at these two banks, ICICI Bank also focuses, the aggression is also backed by their adoption of technology. Definitely between ICICI and HDFC, I'm sure some of you will vouch for this, that ICICI is far ahead of HDFC Bank in terms of using of technology. Do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very much, sir.
Yeah. So this is, how do you want to communicate your employees' competency requirements? In fact, simplification of the processes, adoption of technology, aggressiveness of the individuals, and some flexibility to the decision makers. All these things are there in the case of ICICI Bank, which definitely deserves a lot of appreciation compared to HDFC Bank, which has been developed by a certain individual at certain point in time. But I think they are stuck with that, and unless there is certain amount of repositioning or reimagining that organization, they may continue to do well in the way they are doing, but others perhaps will overtake them, is what my take is. So you'll have to map the competency requirements and competencies that are available and find the gaps, and then comes the role of L&D in terms of how do you want to bridge the gap between what is intended and what is available and what is actual, and how do you create that path for change in the organization. The development, identified gaps become the agenda for the development centers. Now, the development of competencies, first of all, you have certain competency requirements, then you have certain individuals. Individuals are assessed in the competency centers, and their competencies are deciphered, and you have a basket of individuals' competencies and the expected competencies of the organization. Then you have to do the clustering of what are the gaps and what are the areas for you to focus on. The L&D part, that is where the L&D comes in, and how do you bridge the gap between what you want versus what is available in the clusters, right? Now that leads to development of those training programs and enabling people to acquire those additional competencies so that your organizational performance as a whole can move upwards. Then distinct competencies basically are the competencies represent that the behavioral dimensions are unique to the organization. I think what we have discussed, ICICI versus HDFC, adequately demonstrates that there are some unique characteristics they are looking in individuals. This has to happen at the time of the recruitment itself, people have to be taken with those competencies. You cannot inject the competencies after you take the individuals into the organization, and therefore the assessment center comes into picture there. These are the differentiating factors for one organization to the other organization. Therefore, one organization performs differently from the other organization. Organization in the same sector can be different and distinct the way they achieve business results. In fact, we have already discussed adequately. Same banking, two different organizations, two distinct competencies, two distinct performance criteria, and both are successful. We cannot say one is more successful or less successful than the other. Their balance sheets may look different, the numbers may keep changing, but both can be classified as successful organizations, right? And the organization then decides what kind of a strategy and culture you need to develop. The culture of ICICI Bank is definitely to be aggressive, to be very, very aggressive is their culture, whereas HDFC doesn't follow that kind of a culture. That is because of the founding fathers of the organization. Now, integration competencies can be integrated to all the HR functions, recruitment and selection. You know, once you know the competencies of the various roles in the organization, various positions, you can use those competencies in various HR related functions, right from the recruitment and selection to the succession plan. It's a whole gamut. You can start mapping these competencies, and hence that was the conference with which I said earlier, competency or the development center management has huge opportunity for budding entrepreneurs to start their own businesses and successfully practice it, but it requires tremendous amount of hard work. Initially, to establish it requires tremendous amount of hard work, right? Now, criticisms and competencies, basically, the first criticism is you lack common definitions. I mean, how do you define a certain competency? It can vary from one organization to the other organization, and all the people, all the departments in the same organization, different verticals may not have the same application, and therefore the definitions are right now still a challenge, and hence the competency movement has actually not gone as far as it should have gone in the last 30 years or so, right? In the 1773 it started, 1993 it reached a certain amount of milestone. From 1993 to today, I think it's about 30 years. The amount of progress that it had made is not as much as one wanted to see it 30 years before, right? Becoming too precise. I think if you define these things too precise, that creates some kind of a difficulty. the bounded reality comes in. People who are using them will not cross the boundaries, and hence there is a problem in terms of the usability of those definitions. And to what extent they have to be precise and to what extent they should be flexible is still a big debate. So these are the things which will make applicability of competency mapping a bit challenging, but I think it is catching up. What I can clearly see is people are now realizing, in fact, the latest movement is that henceforth, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, organizations will not look at your degree certificates. Organizations will not recruit people based on their universities, whether you are from IIT or IIM or some other college. They will look at your basically competencies, which is assessed by a development center or assessment center, and then that report is taken for all practical purposes to hire somebody or not to hire somebody, or to promote somebody or not to promote somebody. That is likely to happen. In fact, you all know now a lot of AI-based interview systems have come in where individuals do not take part. AI-based machine will ask certain questions to the individuals. The machine analyzes not only the answers from the intellectual perspective or the subject matter perspective, it also analyzes the body language of the individual, and it classifies them into 4 or 5 different areas and then gives an output, printed output on the individual, and that is considered to be a very valuable output for the decisions on either the hiring decisions or the promotion decision, progression decisions. So the things are changing in the market. I guess the technology development will enable and push the frontiers of using the competencies in the organizational context far ahead of what it is today. So the competencies, basically what are the essential things that are required in the competencies? They must be observable behaviors. They must be clear and easy to understand. So if the making things complex is not the important thing here, making complex things simple is very important. Behavior is associated with the competency must be documented in the organizational context. And when we go to the technical competencies or leadership competencies, then you will see how much of documentation is involved. One of the problems, one of the weaknesses of this entire thing is it requires tremendous amount of time to be invested, a lot of documentation to be done. And that is why a lot of people are shying away from, implementing this. The behavioral indicator must be discrete. The action statement must relate to only one competency at a time, and they must only reflect behaviors or data. For example, you have to be very careful in framing the competency related statements. Here you have an example, focus on setting and achieving goals. If you are talking about an individual, if you are talking about an individual who is focused and also achieving the goals, break it into two parts. Write it as focus on setting goals, which is one competency. The other one is adapted achieving goals is another one. If you mix these two, it is very difficult to respond to how objectively respond to that and score the individual on whether setting and achieving goals are they are not same, they are not identical. One may be good at setting goals, but may not be very adept at achieving goals. The other person may not be very great at setting goals, but may be adept at achieving goals. So the way you frame the choice of words that you use for framing your statements is very, very important. Competencies must apply to every individual being considered in a data set. So if your particular job role in an organization, in a position, basically, if it requires Excel as a competency requirement, use of Excel or Excel macros as a competency, then it should be applicable to everyone who is applying for the job or who is considered for the job, whether it is internal promotion opportunity or external hiring opportunity. That should apply to every individual who is considered for the job. You cannot have discrimination of using it for some and not using it for others. I think we will stop here. It's already 5:27. We have another 3 minutes. So before we close, we can interact. The rest of it I'll cover in the next class and also take on the remaining, the module 2. So don't worry about it. So any questions? I know some of you have not spoken today, but I wish that all of you speak and contribute your thoughts on the topics that we're discussing, because most of us are exposed to these situations in our organizations. Jigar Mistry sir, आप नई बात की आज. Today you have not contributed. Any reason?
Oh, packet है पूरा.
No, you,
Sir.
okay, you have spoken. I know.
Sir, MB here.
Yeah, I know. I have been observing you. You have contributed today. Some of you have not contributed.
I
Jigar,
just wanted to share regarding competencies. Yeah,
please.
in our organization, we do use competencies for recruitment, competencies for upskilling, competencies for career growth. We actually have a competency grid as well for them to, to show them the path, how they move from the beginner level to an achiever level and for the next level as well.
Which organization is this?
I'm working for Exceltis, which is a Spanish multinational.
Okay, wonderful. No wonder, if you're working with any multinational company, most of them have adopted this much before the Indian companies. Indian companies are still catching up, and we don't have enough of competent people in the companies to implement this. That's one challenge. Yeah, great. That's wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I hope the 1.5 hours that we have spent is productive and useful to all of you. And we will increase the speed and intensity of our discussions as we go along. The first class itself, I didn't want to, dump a lot of stuff on you, and I think it has to be internalized. More of understanding the subject is more important than just dumping something and completing my task of 1.5 hours. So learning is definitely the focus of our sessions. Yes, ma'am. Smita, ma'am, any thoughts?
No, sir, I was just actually going through the competency mapping of CBSE. I had this one questionnaire which has been released by the CBSE board, but I really have a doubt in it if you can just clear it out for me. It has a section called stakeholder satisfaction. So is that only from the student's perspective that we need to assess them, or is that from the management perspective? Is it in the perspective of a peer, that is a colleague?
Ma'am, I have not seen that CBSE questionnaire, whatever you are referring to. But
Yeah.
it all depends on what stakeholders are defined as.
It's given as a general one to assess if the teacher is responsible and cooperative in his or her behavior towards the management, parents, staff, and students. So,
This is what I was just referring to. You know, they cannot make such a complex statement. You know,
yeah,
your
this.
behavior cannot be equal to all of them. See,
Yeah, when you told that point, telling you need to have a clear one.
yes.
In the previous one, I was actually going through, so I got this confusion in this questionnaire. It has been released by CBSE board.
Ma'am,
Out of the 15, 20
honest.
competencies which is looking at it.
Let's be very honest. I think those guys who are making there may not have the subject knowledge as much as required for preparing those kinds of questionnaires. And hence you will have this kind of issues. Yeah. Right.
So when we assess the teachers, we definitely, as a trainer, probably we will have a both the participants and even the assessment for people who are doing the assessments will have a confusion to assess in which aspect of the teacher that person has got his expertise in.
That's true, very true. I think Mr. Anand Kumar wants to add something to what you have said because he's also in the school space.
Yeah.
So yes, Saritaji. I think I have seen that teacher competency framework from CBSE,
Yes.
and those teachers are required to perform against their roles, and their skill, attitude, behavior has to be aligned with those roles. So they have to not only teach in the classroom, as well as they have to work with other stakeholders like community, and then students also, and then student bodies also, and then institutions also, different kinds of like CRC, BRC and all. So in government setup, in CBSE also, so these whatever attribute you talked about, one competency, that is as per their role, and it is for teacher. Stakeholder is defined.
No, the questionnaire actually has around 8 questions, 8 to 9 questions, wherein 8 questions. See, anywhere you just look at the questions, they are open loop, open-ended questions. Do I know about the rights of management, parents, staff, and students?
Yes.
So, do I know about the importance of keeping stakeholders engaged? Now, the question that is the third one, stakeholder engaged, every answer is different with every perspective. So when I was just relating this to sir telling it that the behavioral indicators must be discrete, that point what has been explained there comes into a conflict when you prepare a questionnaire like this was a point.
I certainly agree with you. I think that has to be done with a little more, thought.
A little bit elaborate way, and
Some
probably
kind of
a section.
expert should prepare it, not some
Yes. That is challenging actually. Yes. That is a challenge with the psychological assessment of competencies. These type of
Probably if you
questions.
ask me, if you assess me, probably I'll be able to relate to manage more students than to the management, because my thought process may not be going towards the management and the revenue. My thought process may go towards the students and the students' interest.
Absolutely. I think I fully agree with you. And certainly whatever the questionnaire that you are
Yes.
referring to requires a lot more refinement, without doubt. Okay.
Yes.
So let's see.
Yes.
At the end of all these sessions, maybe something will happen.
We mostly hope the teacher and all the trainers who are here after this may contribute to the CBSE ones.
No, ma'am, you can write an article and publish without hurting anybody's feelings. You can write a very scientific article and then publish it. What is there? Nothing wrong in that.
Yeah. Definitely, sir, will try with your guidance.
Yeah, no, that is how we impact the society. Like, one is impacting the class, and another one is impacting the society. I
Yes.
think if you are convinced that something is not right and it can be improved, we should also do that.
Because many of them do not take this framework at all, sir. Even when we consider a training procedure for teachers, it is always in a traditional methodology of classroom management and the other things. But they never think about the communication and the competency, digital competence. It's a very good framework, but there are a little bit of loopholes in that framework when I saw the questionnaire I was going through.
Possibly they will also improve over a period of time, unless
Yeah.
if they start somewhere, they cannot improve. So this is just the beginning, version 1.
Yes.
Perhaps
Yeah.
some people like you all will contribute to its improvement.
Hope we get that soon.
Okay, right.
Sure, sir.
So
Thank you,
thank you
sir.
very
Thank you.
much for all of you for being back to this class, and I'm very, very happy to interact with you, and hope that you are also enjoying these sessions, and we will meet again in the next session. Thank you very much.
Sir, by any
Thank you.
chance, can we
Thank you,
get
sir.
your contact number?
My
Actually,
contact,
you had shared it in the first semester, sir, but I just misplaced it.
my
I'm
number
really sorry.
990-810.
Just a minute, sir. 990.
0.
So can you please type it in the chat box for me?
Dot box. Is that right? Okay, 1 second. Put in the chat box now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
WhatsApp enabled, that is.
Yeah.
So, anything, any doubt, any question? But you can send me that questionnaire. I can look at it and send you my own views on that. You can develop an article on that.
Sure, sir. Definitely.
could you
Your
share-
guidance will help.
Yes, sir.
Sir, could you share the PDF of these slides, sir?
I will definitely
Thank
say
you.
after the next class I will share. Yeah,
Done. Sure. Thank you.
sure.
Thank you, sir.
All of you take care and good luck. We meet again. Yeah.
Right,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.